But I want to start with some of the news that came in between the award show and the press conference on Monday. That was Tyson Fury, who on Sunday announced his retirement from the sport of boxing. Take a listen.
Hi everybody, I'm going to make this short and sweet. I'd like to announce my retirement from boxing. It's been a blast. I've loved every single minute of it, and I'm going to end with this. Dick Turpin wore a mask. God bless everybody. See you on the other side. Get up!
So Keith, by my count, this is at least Tyson Fury's third retirement announcement, and has understandably met with some skepticism. Do you believe that he is going to stick with his retirement this time around?
I definitely do not think that. What I think Tyson Fury did on Monday was started the negotiating process for the Anthony Joshua fight. That's what I actually think happened. And I get it. Like, he's retired, I believe, 6 times now, honestly. If you count every time that he said it early in his career too, because he said it multiple times then, I believe it's 5 or 6. But that's boxing to some degree, Chris. This happens all the time in the sport. Guys announce their retirement and come back. I don't think anyone's taking it all that seriously. And frankly, with that much money at stake for him to fight Anthony Joshua, despite that they're both coming off of losses, I just don't see how he would walk away at this point. He has a lot of children. He still clearly has something left. I mean, he was extremely competitive with Alexander Usyk in their last fight. I thought Usyk won the fight 8 rounds to 4, but Fury was right there in a lot of those rounds. It was a very competitive fight. I don't see how he walks away from that quote unquote bag to fight Anthony Joshua, because they'll get almost 100,000 people, as much as the London Fire Department will allow to cram into Wembley Stadium whenever they do it. And they'll both be celebrated in the way that they should be, because they carried, particularly Joshua for a long time, carried British boxing at the top level. Fury caught up to him in terms of being a draw and was certainly one of the best heavyweights of this era. And it would kind of be a shame if they, even though they're both coming off losses, and of course Joshua's loss was much more devastating and decisive than Fury's loss, to see them not fight each other, it would be kind of a shame, because it would be a great event, and they've been rivals for a long time, and British boxing fans who supported the sport from the ground up for so long deserve it.
Here's my theory on Fury. When he announces his retirement, whenever he's done it, I think he actually means it at the time. Like, yeah. I don't think he's announcing his retirement necessarily as a ploy. I think him sitting there in the front seat of his car, posting a 30-second video where he's bringing up Dick Turpin, I think in his mind, he is retired. Just like I think in his mind, when he announced he wanted to sign a 10-fight deal before the Francis Ngannou fight, I think he really believed that at the time too. I just think he has no filter. He says what is on his mind. He says what he believes. But I'm with you. I do not think he is ultimately retired. I think the 2 fights against Usyk showed that, to your point, that he is still among the best heavyweights in the world. He knows what a fight against Anthony Joshua not only means financially, but on the British landscape. We can say that Usyk is the best heavyweight in the world right now, but Joshua versus Fury, you can make an argument that it decides the greatest British fighter of this generation. Daniel Dubois is rising right now, but of the last 10, 15 years, the winner of this fight can probably stake their claim as the best British fighter of this generation. So I do think that in the months ahead, you're going to hear more from Tyson Fury. But I also think at this time, and I've heard this from people around Fury, that there's probably some family pressure going on there. I mean, the reporting before this most recent fight with Usyk was that Fury hadn't talked to his wife in 6 months, the entire training camp. Like, his wife Paris was there at the fight, but he himself said he'd gone the whole camp without talking to his family. We know, from covering Tyson in recent years that, when he's retired, his wife has seemed pretty happy about that. It's him that brings himself out of retirement. So I do think there's probably some family pressure attached to it. The fact that he's making an announcement here, Keith, 3 weeks after the fight ended, to me, he should have just waited 3 months before deciding what he was going to do. So I think the bottom line is I think he does mean it, but like you, I don't think he's going to have the same feeling 2 or 3 months from now.
Well, Chris, the same pull that he gets from his family to step away from the sport, because of course you don't want to see your dad or your husband get punched in the head, particularly when you're financially stable, but beyond financially stable, they've got plenty of money and his kids will be taken care of course, and their kids will be taken care of. I would assume so. He's made so much money over the last few years, but the Joshua fight could make so much money, and he's still 36 years old, which is not old for a heavyweight. It's a little older for, Terrence Crawford's 37 now. So, in the lower weight classes, it means a little more than it does for heavyweights because they don't have to drain their bodies as much to make weight, and they don't have to make weight. Um, so while your family wants you to stop doing it because they want your time and your full attention, you're doing it for your family, like we all are. I mean, we're not making the kind of money that Tyson Fury's making. We're all doing it for, wives, girlfriends, whatever, killed children, whatever you're doing it for your family. So I think there will. I do think he's going to fight again, and I agree with what you're saying. Like in the immediate, I think he does mean it. He spent Christmas with his family, and I'm sure he's enjoying being around his kids. He's a jovial guy. He's a family guy and everything. So he's enjoying that part of his life right now. But boxing is all he knows, and of course you're going to eventually have to figure out what to do with the rest of your life. I don't think that time is quite now for Tyson Fury, and I do expect him to wind up fighting Anthony Joshua because there's just too much money at stake. And he wants to go beat Joshua. He wants to go prove that he's the best British heavyweight of this era. And Joshua wants to prove the same. So I do think they'll eventually come together. And if I had to guess, probably sometime later this year, that fight will happen at Wembley Stadium.
I mean, summertime at Wembley Stadium, maybe early September at the latest that's the best time for it. That's a huge event over in the UK. And look, long term, I still believe Fury's the kind of guy that's going to fight till the brakes come off. Like it's just intertwined into his DNA. He is a fighter, and we've had some pretty good glimpses into the life of Tyson Fury. Some provided by him through some interviews he's done over the years, particularly when he was coming back from that depression back in 2018. Watching that Netflix series, like you can see when he's not fighting, like he just doesn't really know what to do with himself.
Right.
And look, you can say the same thing about a lot of fighters, but Tyson Fury in particular, a guy that has more money than he's ever going to be able to spend, lives a relatively inexpensive life in the UK. I just think without boxing, he just kind of loses a bit of himself. So if I had to guess, I'd say he's fighting not just one more time, but if he wins 2, 3, 4 more times, what he said before, closer to the 10-fight deal he wanted 2 or 3 fights ago than the wrap it up and retire that he is now. So,
no, yeah, Chris, I agree. And the biggest thing is if he walks away from boxing, he's left to his vices, right? Because he's had alcohol and drug issues. He's battled depression. He's been very open about that. So when you're kind of just left to your thoughts, so to speak, and you don't know what to do with the rest of your life, because that's the thing that every professional athlete has to figure out, because you die multiple deaths. You die when your career ends and you die your natural death, they always say. So what does Tyson Fury want to do with the rest of his life? And, that's a hard question for anyone to answer, particularly when you're not even 40 years old.
So let's for a moment take Tyson Fury at his word and believe that he's retired. If he is actually retired, it does put Anthony Joshua in an interesting spot, because Joshua, did not take that rematch against Daniel Dubois because Eddie Hearn believed, win or lose, that a Fury versus AJ fight would be there for him in the summer, and they want to cash in on that fight no matter the circumstance. If Fury's not available, I'm not exactly sure where Anthony Joshua goes, because if he wanted Daniel Dubois, he could have had him. You didn't need to wait and see what happens with the winner, Dubois and Parker. If Parker wins that fight, I think Parker and his team are more likely to be interested in a Usyk fight than they are a rematch with Anthony Joshua. You can kind of go down the rankings. Like, you're not going to see him in with Martin Bakoli. You're not going to see him in with Jay Lee Zhang. Too dangerous, too little upside for those types of fights. Like Jarrell Miller was someone that came to mind when I started thinking about Anthony Joshua opponents for the first half of 2025. If Fury is not available, Deontay Wilder seemingly back in the mix now. If he gets a win over the immortal Curtis Harper, if that's the way that matchup is going, all of a sudden you can try to resuscitate that fight. What do you think, with the understanding that AJ is going to sit and wait for a little while? Like, what do you think the landscape looks like for AJ if Fury is out of the mix.
Well, look, there's no call for him to fight Usyk again. Obviously, I know you didn't mention that, but there's no call for that. He's already lost to him twice.
That's how little I thought about it, Keith, but I didn't even mention it. That's
Yeah,
how
no,
little I thought of
and
that
there's
fight.
no
Yeah.
reason to see it a third time. He's already lost to him twice, despite that one of them was a split decision. I thought he lost decisively to him twice, and he's been violently knocked out by Daniel Dubois. So, do we really need to see that again? I mean, if he wants to do it, yeah, the British boxing public would get behind it because they're big Anthony Joshua fans. There's no real need for it. He was devastatingly knocked out, so I don't see the call for that. And as you mentioned, he has history with Jarrell Miller. He obviously has history with Deontay Wilder. It'd be kind of, while I would love to see Fury fight Joshua at this point, it would be kind of sad to see Anthony Joshua fight Deontay Wilder at this point. I mean, think about that, where we were 5 years ago when everyone wanted to see that happen, and it seemed close to happening once upon a time, and everyone wanted to see it. Now, this, this, no, yeah, no thanks. The Jarrell Miller fight, well, there is a rivalry there, and obviously everything that happened when Jarrell Miller tested positive for every PED under the sun. Uh, Anthony Joshua has a disdain for him, so it would be a good promotion for whatever that's worth if you're just trying to keep Anthony Joshua busy. But let's say you keep him busy, right? And for argument's sake, let's say that Tyson Fury does not come back to fight. Well, who is he fighting then? There's no real. Now, maybe he then would take the Dubois fight, but who knows what happens to Dubois from there? Who knows if he even beats Joseph Parker? But then if he beats Joseph Parker and then he loses to Usyk again, let's say Usyk goes through with that rematch. I mean, Joshua could do it, I guess, but then they're both coming off. He's been violently knocked out and he has 4 losses, and Dubois would have been beaten 3 times, including twice by Usyk. Then that fight is diminished. So I don't know what you would really do with him. The Jarrell Miller thing makes a lot of sense, Chris, because he's not viewed. He was never as good as Deontay Wilder was, knocking everyone out, but he appears to have more left than Deontay Wilder has at this point. So maybe that's the way that they go, but it's a tricky spot in terms of matching him because he's still a huge star, but you can't go through this rebuilding process with him again. You just can't. How many times are you going to rebuild the guy,
Yeah, now in his mid-30s, it gets tougher by the year. Like,
and does he want to do it? Right? I mean, forget about the promotional part of it and all that. Does he want to keep rebuilding him for what?
no, I think he wants a payday, a big one, and that might be the end of him. The Jarrell Miller fight, like, yeah, I thought Jarrell beat Andy Ruiz in the last time out. You could even bring it back to New York, right? Like, kind of resuscitate that whole thing there. Like, AJ comes back to New York City to try to avenge his one loss.
Chris, couldn't you have him fight Ruiz?
It could. I don't know, but that to me is the risk reward there.
You could bring that back to New York because that's where it all went wrong for him, right?
I think, but to your early point, I think that Jarrell would sell more than Ruiz would. I think Jarrell would sell.
Sure.
I think the promotion would be hostile. It would be good, and the buildup would be good, and the Garden would be sold out. And I can see a storyline there. And look, I'm with you on Wilder. The way he's been losing as of late, particularly his most recent fights, has not given me any faith that there's anything left in boxing for Deontay Wilder. But I do expect him, if this is the fight that happens with Curtis Harper, to obliterate Curtis Harper, who very recently was getting beat by the Richard Torreses of the world. Like, he was on that quasi-name to fight a prospect tour that some of these guys have been on. He's best known, as you know, as the guy that walked away from FAA Jogba, which was an all-time moment for Curtis Harper. So I do expect Deontay, regardless of what he has left, to be able to just have a highlight reel knockout of Curtis. Like, the kind of knockout we saw against Dominic Breazeale and we saw against Robert Helenius. Maybe that gives an AJ fight enough juice for Eddie Hearn to put it together. You and I know better, but like, if you can sell the public at large, hey, Wilder got his knockout mojo back, maybe, just maybe. But it is extremely difficult to envision any kind of long-term path for Anthony Joshua without Tyson Fury in that mix.